Andrew Yang was known as the math candidate. Well, here's the math that both parties hope you never do. The Senate right now hangs on a handful of votes. The majority has almost all of the power. They set the schedule, chair every committee, and decide which bills ever reach the floor. The minority gets to obstruct. That's it. But what if a small group of independent senators, people who don't owe either party anything, held enough seats to deny either side an outright majority? What would they demand in exchange for organizing the chamber? What could they change? That is the Fulcrum Strategy. And Todd Achilles in Idaho and Bob Chu in Colorado are two of the candidates who could make it real. From the Mountain West, with very different backgrounds, they've both arrived at the same conclusion. The system is not going to fix itself. Someone has to hold the balance of power and use it. Welcome Todd Achilles, independent candidate for United States Senate out of Idaho, and Bob Chu, independent candidate for the United States Senate out of Colorado, actually running as a forwardist. In Colorado, we have ballot access as the Forward Party of Colorado. So Todd and Bob, welcome to you both.
Welcome, Lindsey. First, let's clarify very different backgrounds. He was a ground pounder, and I was a bubblehead. Right?
So they are both
Army
veterans.
versus Navy.
Both translate. They're both veterans.
So I served in the Navy on a nuclear attack submarine right after I got out of college. I was an officer, division officer, did one tour, very old boat, but it was exciting.
And I served a couple years on active duty as a tank commander, not in the Navy.
They don't have a lot
We were
of time.
both encased in steel.
I was going to say, unless it was an
Yes.
amphibious tank.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to this Fulcrum Strategy. This is very, very wonky, the word fulcrum. But really what we're talking about is a wedge group of voters in the United States Senate who would hold all of the leverage to swing the power in a narrowly contested Senate. So Todd and Bob, as you think about your races as independents, how do you all think about the Fulcrum Strategy? How do you think about how you would wield power in the United States Senate to serve the people of Colorado and Idaho? Bob, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Well, I go back to Joe Lieberman, to, Kristen Sinema, and Joe Manchin especially, who wielded a lot of power by being a maverick in their own party. We would be more than mavericks in one of the parties. We would be totally available to swing back and forth depending on the issue and really upset the power dynamics in the Senate and turn politics as usual on its head.
And is that something that motivated you, Bob, to run that opportunity?
Yes, to force a conversation around the serious issues, and whichever party wants to get really serious about the difficult issues that face us on that particular issue, that's where I'll throw my chips. But if many of us get elected as independents, then we will have our own little caucus that can swing back and forth. Todd?
Yeah, Todd, talk to us about how you are already seeing the promise of a Fulcrum Strategy, the promise of this small network of independent office holders. What is it already looking like now just during campaign season?
Well, there's a good group of us, and we're all military veterans running as independents for the Senate, and I think we're all on the same page that priority number one is we've got to get Congress functioning again, which means breaking the grip of the two-party system. And in a state like Idaho that is heavily Republican, I mean, it's not that way because Idahoans are profoundly conservative, but it's really that way because there's been no countervailing force for a generation. The DNC's kind of given up on the little red states like Idaho and Wyoming and the Dakotas. And as a result, we've just had this one-party system. And I think when Idahoans look at what's going on in Congress, they see that it's not functioning. They see that the party in power is not doing what needs to be done, and they're ready for change. Republicans are angry with what's happening in Congress right now. Democrats are angry about what's happening in Congress. And they see the path as this independent fulcrum, which can deny a majority to either party and therefore set the priorities, right? Because you can't organize Congress or you can't organize the Senate without having a majority. And this gives us tremendous power to do those hard changes that the parties just have refused to do for the last 2 decades.
Power for good.
Yeah,
How are people responding to you, to each of you as independent candidates? And the fulcrum theory sounds sort of ethereal. Most people wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about. Do you bring that up as a way to allay what they might not be saying to you, which is, what kind of a difference would you make as an independent?
Yeah, absolutely, Governor. And I tell the same math to Republican or Democratic audiences as I'm campaigning around the state. And here's what it looks like, right? Right now, the Senate is 53 Republicans, 45 Dems, 2 independents. And again, because the DNC has given up on these little red states, I think the consensus is that 48 is the ceiling for Democrats in the Senate. So if the Dems pick up 3 and 26, then it's 50, 48, and 2, and in the Senate, nothing changes. But if Bob and I win in November, then it's 48, 48, and 4, right? And we fundamentally change the direction of the Senate, and this Fulcrum Caucus, really sets the priorities. And everybody's excited about that, right? Because that means we can finally get done what everyone in Idaho wants to see get done. Term limits, get money out of our elections, eliminate this gerrymandering stuff. All of these just fundamental reforms that we know it's time for.
So in Colorado, it generally votes Democratic, but that doesn't reflect the registration. The reason it votes Democratic is because the Republican Party in Colorado is dysfunctional or non-functional. And there's not very good candidates, and it's not funded at all. 52% of Coloradans are not an R or a D. They're independent or they're minor party. I'm running to represent them, to give them an option that is not the Democrat machine. And when I tell voters about this Fulcrum strategy, they're really excited to know that in Washington, there could be a group of people, a small group, who are actually working for the voters, for the good of our country, now and in the future.
We had a podcast recently, Bob and Todd, where we talked about the power of storytelling and the importance of storytelling around this work. So Bob, when you and Todd, when you talk to voters about the Fulcrum strategy, we're all acknowledging here, and Governor Whitman said this, it sounds like this kind of game theory. What we're talking about is a wedge caucus in a closely held minority and majority breakdown in the Senate. So how do you describe it? What is the story you each tell to voters? Because you don't knock on someone's door and say, let me tell you about the Fulcrum strategy.
Right.
How are you making that resonate with people?
First of all, I don't lead with that. I lead with the fact that I am running as an independent. I was at an energy conference on the Western Slope last week, and I met a woman, and in about 90 seconds, she was a fan because of what I was talking about and running as an independent. Turns out she is president of a community college out on the Western Slope. All right. I talked to the hotel desk clerks, and they're instantly a fan just knowing that there's an independent running who actually is credible and funded and has a real chance. It's only after I talk about that, and then we get into more details about how this would really work in the Senate, that's when I talk about the group of us veterans, all of us committed to the Constitution and integrity, doing the right thing, and then turning politics as usual on its head. That's what resonates.
I love that. Todd, how are you communicating your ability for impact in the United States Senate with this group of men and women?
Yeah, the conversations that I have in Idaho, it goes something like this. Hey, I'm Todd Achilles. I'm running for the U.S. Senate against Jim Risch. And the response is invariably, oh, good, he's too old. He needs to retire. And then the next question is, so what are you, Republican or Democrat? And I respond with, well, neither. I'm running as an independent because I think that's the best way to get Congress and get this country working again. And people are like, oh, man, this is great. I like you already.
You know, one of the things that we feel so great about this group of candidates, and there's a lot in the Pacific Northwest and the mountains. You know, you actually have a number of colleagues who are coming forward as independent candidates.
Pioneer spirit.
Pioneer spirit
Real
in
pioneer
this
spirit.
election cycle. But what I really love about this group of candidates is that you have all already put country over your own self-interest. You know, you have all served. You've served the country. And as members of the military, you can't be partisan. You have to serve Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. And what you're really serving is the Constitution. And so I think that the fact that we're able to attract people who understand that notion of service over self, it's something that the country is hungry for right now. People are really tired of self-dealing and corruption and this notion of what's in it for me and I just want to get reelected. I don't think any of you, couldn't do something else. You both have had really robust careers doing other things, and this is service. And so, you know, we're grateful for that. And we think that when you talk to people about a group of people like you, not just any group of people, but a group of people who understand public service, coming together to be the deciding votes in the Senate, that's what's exciting, is who you are.
Yeah.
Very much so.
You know, and building on to that, Lieutenant Governor, I served as a tank commander. In my tank crew, there were 4 of us, and just, 4 random guys thrown together. My loader was from Maryland. My driver was from South Carolina. My gunner was from Louisiana, and me, a farm kid from Oregon. And listen, if we couldn't get together, we're dead. And I think that's the essence of that military experience, where you're just random people thrown together. I still, to this day, would have absolutely no idea what political party any of my crew would align with. And it didn't matter. And I think that's the spirit that we bring to it. And when I served in the Idaho legislature, I served as a Democrat. There were only 9 of us out of 70 in the House. By definition, you had to be just extraordinarily bipartisan and listen well to get anything done. And those are those skills I think you learn in the military and you carry throughout your life.
Todd, you referenced your service. Oh, sorry, Bob.
My engineering watch team was a little more than 4 people. It was about 10. My reactor operator was this young kid from Puerto Rico. But he's shimming rods and shifting main coolant pumps. We're controlling the reactor plant. He then served 20 years, retired, and then he came to work for me when my company was just brand new, and he worked for me for another 25 years. And he is now retired in Florida, very comfortable. I am not a politician at all. I have 0 political experience, but I have real experience building a business and serving our country and making employees much better off financially for the long term. So I think this is great, what we're doing. I'm excited. I decided to run because neither of the major parties will address the difficult issues that we face. They have their narratives, and I don't want to be beholden to a narrative or a platform dictated by others. That's why I'm running.
So Idaho and Colorado, we were just talking about the Mountain West, Lieutenant Governor, and this kind of pioneer spirit. They're very different states politically. As you just said, Todd, when you were serving in the state legislature, there was a supermajority that the Republican Party held, whereas Colorado has a deep history, Bob, of political reform, and the Forward Party, as I said, actually has ballot access there. But you are both running against incumbents with the same basic argument. So what does the Mountain West kind of culturally understand about independence that Washington, D.C. just doesn't get? Todd, go first.
I'll start.
Oh, go, Bob.
Okay. All right. So as I said before, the majority of Coloradans do not associate with either major party. That's what they understand. They're voting based on who's going to respond to their needs, who's going to make Washington work. And I'm offering them that kind of an opportunity. Todd?
Yeah, I think what's interesting in Idaho, when folks are looking at it from the outside, they think there's absolutely no way that there's a competitive race there. But the reality is, and we've got this in our polling and through others, 65% of Idahoans self-identify as independent, or I'm a Republican, but I lean independent. And it's a pragmatic center-right state, right? Ag is 17% of the economy. What's been happening with this administration on tariffs and other things has been extraordinarily hard on the ag sector and on the state. And they just, they really want that kind of pragmatic, bipartisan representative in Congress. And, this came up in the polling that we did at the beginning of the month. And I love this number because I think it speaks to the Idaho that I know and love. 75% of Idahoans want a politician that'll work with both sides of the aisle. 75%.
Wow.
I mean, that's the essence of what's going on here, and that's the missing middle, right? That's what neither party's been able to address, and I think why people are so excited about this campaign.
When we look at the country, our strategy was very different than the two major parties that seem to focus most in on those states that are very closely divided, those swing states that matter during presidential elections. And we said, give us the rest of the country. Give us give us all the 80% plus states that are all seemingly all Republican or all Democrat, because that's not true. It's more apparent than real. And I knew this from my own experience in Massachusetts, where, if you ask people or if you looked at our elected officials, they're monolithic. They're all Democrats. But more than 60% of the voters are actually independents. And so they're actually voting with their feet. They're leaving. And so fewer and fewer people have been electing more and more extreme candidates in 80% of the country and just waiting for independent candidates like you to step up to give them some choice. They don't have any choice because the other party has withered in those states entirely.
Yep.
And are you finding as you go around that what people are hearing out of Washington as the major issues to be addressed is different than what you're hearing from your constituents, the people you meet? Bob, go ahead.
I'm going to say that it's a mix. I mean, just the other day, the House passed housing legislation with a vast majority. The Senate did as well. But a deep analysis of that legislation is that it's more symbolic than substance. That's a different conversation. The politicians are not talking about our national debt and entitlement reform, Social Security and solvency. But when I mention those, people are really concerned about those. Of course, there's the pocketbook issues of affordability, the war in Iran. So it's a mix, is what I would have to say honestly.
What are you hearing, Todd?
I think just building off of Bob, the housing legislation that passed was definitely positive, and I think that resonates with a lot of Idahoans. We've got one of the least affordable housing markets in the country, and then the passage through the Senate of the Iran War Powers concurrent resolution yesterday, I think was also good and aligns with Idahoans. But I think there's all of the reform around the institution itself. That Congress just looks like the two parties kind of battling it out rather than trying to get hard stuff done. You don't, that's what I hear on the campaign trail. They want that fixed. They want the institution working again. They want a Congress that they can be proud of again. And that's not really coming through, I think, in the national press. And same as Bob, national debt. Another big one for us is immigration. We've got to have some immigration reform to keep Idaho's economy going. So I think those are some of the gaps between what you hear nationally and what we're hearing driving around Idaho.
I would add that the six of us veterans are developing a policy platform. The first item on that is to actually pass budgets on time. And when I say to ordinary folks that I want to basically either do away with or limit the use of reconciliation to pass major legislation, they understand that, and they're upset about how that all plays out, where one party jams through their favorite bills without any kind of cross-party consensus building or compromise. And that's what they want. And that's what we, as a Fulcrum bloc, will give this country.
I want to expand on what Bob just said in terms of the coordination that you have right now across the slate. And Bob Chu, for all of our listeners and viewers out there, as he himself has been donating to his fellow campaigns and candidates, all of the other independent senators, Bob has been making donations himself to support his colleagues in this race. And so from a policy perspective and also from a personal perspective, Bob, what does it mean to have this network around the country of independent candidates and a movement that the movement that Forward has been building?
You know, I am all in for this movement away from the two major parties, because the two major parties are moving further and further away from the middle. So I'm happy to support other candidates that are driving down that middle, who are willing to listen to both sides, who are willing to forge better legislation through compromise, not partisanship, and really have solutions that matter for the American people. So I'm putting my money where my mouth and heart is in the country at our 250th birthday. It's important that we press the reset button on our republic.
What does it mean concretely, Todd, in Idaho to be running against an incumbent? So you said that you talked to voters.
And not just an incumbent, someone who's held virtually every office of any significance in the state.
So they say that Risch is too old. You said the voters say that Risch is too old. But what about, I've always voted for him. You know, he seems fine.
And they voted for him for everything.
Yeah. I mean, he's been in Idaho politics for 50 years. He's had just one or two races that he's lost. He's been kind of an institution. Folks are ready for something new. You know, I think Jim has won these Senate races because there really hasn't been a viable alternative, and we're really bringing that to Idahoans in this campaign. But running against an incumbent like Jim, he's got to run on his record, right? And the comparison that I use is, he graduated from the University of Idaho in the late 60s. He had all the benefits of affordable education, of, a starter home in today's dollars was $150,000 in Idaho. Today it's over $500,000. A year at University of Idaho took 2 weeks of the average Idaho family in 1970. Now it's about 8 weeks. Right, so Jim had all these advantages of the New Deal and sort of an affordable economy that helped people get off the ground, and he's pulled up the ladder behind him. And now folks are struggling just across the board in the state, and I think that's what resonates. If Jim was really leading and representing Idahoans, it would be even easier to live in this state now than what it really is. And people see that. And I think, Jim's running on his record. Unfortunately, he's just become a rubber stamper for what's happening in the White House. And listen, there's some good executive orders coming out of the White House, and there's some bad ones. But the role of a senator is to be a check on the executive branch, not a cheerleader. And I think Idahoans are tired of just Jim being a cheerleader, not looking out for the interest of Idahoans.
In my state, John Hickenlooper's ads have one message. He's going to fight Trump. He's going to fight Trump. He is going to fight Trump. Nothing about solving the problems that face this country. And that's my biggest issue with him. In 2020, he refused to debate his opponent. And I fully expect him to refuse to debate me and the Republican. He just wants to coast on his name. He was mayor of Denver. He was governor of Colorado. He's got great name recognition, and he's hoping to coast to victory that way. And I'm going to shake things up by talking about the really tough issues.
So the two parties have structured the system to make an independent candidacy as hard as possible. Ballot access, fundraising, committee assignments. Bob, how has your experience been different in Colorado, where the Forward Party has ballot access and infrastructure?
I mean, it was unbelievable. I've been talking, I switched to the Forward Party last August, and the support from the Colorado team has been great. They've got a good organization. Many of my regional coordinators come from their executive committee. I did not have to go through a petition process. Instead, it was the Colorado Forward Party people on an assembly call, and that nominated me. So that has made my startup of this campaign totally focused on the team, the strategy, getting out and meeting people, as opposed to worrying about collecting signatures. So I am so grateful that the Forward Party exists in Colorado.
And Todd, you've had to do it completely as an independent without the infrastructure of a political party. What does your campaign look like right now, and how can you create that bench for those coming behind you? What does that look like in Idaho?
No, it's a great question. I mean, it's certainly a lot harder running as an independent. I think our campaign looks more like a citizens initiative campaign than it does a political campaign, just in terms of how we're recruiting volunteers and building out the infrastructure. I mean, we've done really well. The signature threshold in Idaho was not that bad. I think as soon as I say that, the Idaho legislature is going to try and make a change next year.
I'm sure.
And raise that threshold.
Well, count on it. You can count on it.
We're going to have to edit that part of the podcast.
We'll take that out.
Exactly.
Bad luck.
I know my old colleagues are looking at it. But we've got over 1,300 volunteers now. We want to get to 3,000 by the end of the summer. We want to knock on a third of the doors in the state. That's about 250,000 doors. And we're doing great. And people are really excited. And we've got a great mix between Republicans and Dems and independents on the team. I think the core leadership team, I've got two folks who ran my Democratic legislative campaign. I've got some folks who've run Republican campaigns in the state, and I've got somebody that's been really active in the national independent movement. So we've got a really good balance on the team and good geographic distribution across the state. But it's a lot of work. I will say, just building on this, we've got more independents running for state office in Idaho this year than we've ever had.
That's excellent.
And so several of them are veterans, and I'm doing my best to kind of use my campaign to lift them and help them out in their legislative races.
Well, I hope you succeed in doing that, and we're going to have to close in around you and hug you hard and make sure that large group of volunteers that you've assembled doesn't disappear and disperse when your campaign is over. That's always been the problem.
They'll go to Washington with him. So
some of them will,
anyway.
but not all
Not
1,300.
all of them.
And our biggest problem as a movement, and I would say that what independents have been confronting each time they run for office is that even a really charismatic candidate like Perot or like Bloomberg can pull together a lot of people, but then when their campaign is over, they go away, and all the resources go away, and the next person is left, like you are right now, to start from zero. And so what we're trying to do at Forward is to make sure that all of these efforts from all of these wonderful independent campaigns around the country are preserved and built upon, so that for the next person it's not so hard. And maybe the next time someone runs in Idaho as an independent candidate, we can have the things in place so that they'll have Bob Chu's experience instead of yours. And so that's what we're working to build around the country, is that platform for independent candidates and voters.
Yeah, that's great, Lieutenant Governor, and that's exactly what we need.
And we have good Forward people in Idaho, so it's not as if you're totally alone, but they're just not forward in the same sense that
Not
Bob's
on the
got
ballot
them.
yet,
They're
so
not on the
we'll
ballot.
get there. We'll get you
But
there.
we're working.
All right.
We're working toward it.
So as we have two former candidates here hosting our podcast, so Governor Whitman and Lieutenant Governor Healey, I'm going to ask as two former candidates, what advice would you give to Bob and Todd today?
All politics is local. It still is. And that retail stuff that you're doing, and I'm sure you'll do over the 4th of July weekend and all the county fairs and all the various opportunities that you're going to have over the summer, just make the most of them. And people like to know that their candidate, they like to see them, and then they feel invested in them, and they like to know they really are looking at them when they talk to them and care.
Yeah, I would build on that just to say that listening, as I'm sure you found, is the most important thing that you can do. But beyond that, you have to be able to give people hope and optimism, and both of you are extremely optimistic candidates. I think that the very act of running for office is an act of optimism, and so if you can help convey that spirit to the people you're speaking with, that's what people need right now. They need hope for the future, and more than that, a real belief that you can lead in a way that will make the country a better place for everyone. So, and I believe that about you too. So, good luck, and we'll be there for you in any way we can.
We'll do all we can for
I
you.
appreciate that.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
that's great advice. Thank you.
that sense of
Thank you.
optimism and drive certainly is embodied by our Mountain West states and, Americans in these states. Todd is running in Idaho and Bob in Colorado. We've got Brian Bangs running in South Dakota, and Seth Bodner running in Montana. It's just really exciting what's happening out in the Mountain West. So I hope that all of our listeners and our viewers are paying attention to these pioneer states. They're really extraordinary.
And we're ready to come out and help.
Great.
Good luck to you both.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Yeah,
Todd
thank you.
Achilles,
Thank you for
Bob
the time.
Chu. Thank you both for joining us on the Forward Party podcast today.